Something has just happened to you that should not be possible. Not in this world, not in this time, not under the laws that govern ordinary human lives. And yet, here you are, breathing, aware, listening, while forces that have crushed kings, silenced prophets, and erased entire bloodlines failed to even touch you. That alone tells a story no history book dares to write. Because there was a moment, whether you realized it or not, when reality bent around you. A moment when harm was aimed directly at your path, when loss, delay, or destruction was mathematically inevitable. And yet, the impact never landed. You walked away. You remained standing. You continued forward, as if something invisible stepped between you and the strike that was meant to end your trajectory. You may have called it luck. You may have said, "That was close." But deep down, something in you whispered that it was more than that. Because ordinary people do not survive what was designed to stop them. Ordinary lives do not pass through narrow gates untouched while others fall around them. Ordinary souls do not feel that strange stillness after danger, that eerie quiet where the world seems to pause and acknowledge that something just went wrong. For the darkness. What happened to you was not random. It was not coincidence. It was a rupture in probability itself. A fracture in what should have been. A silent declaration that whatever was coming for you was denied access. And even now, as you replay moments that almost ended differently, you can feel it. The unsettling awareness that something intervened without asking permission, without announcing itself, without leaving evidence, except for one undeniable truth. You are still here, when by all visible logic, you should not be. And that survival was not passive. It was not accidental. It was precise, calculated, almost intentional. Because what just happened to you does not fit within the known spiritual record. Across ancient texts, forbidden scrolls, and whispered traditions, there is a pattern that has never been broken lightly. When a soul is marked by opposing forces, the outcome is usually sacrifice, disappearance, or submission. History is full of names that vanished the moment darkness focused on them. Empires were erased. Bloodlines collapsed. Even divine messengers fell when balance demanded it. Protection, in those stories, was always conditional, granted briefly, withdrawn quickly, and paid for in suffering. Yet what unfolded around you defied that ancient rhythm. You were not removed. You were not silenced. You were not traded for balance. Instead, you were preserved, shielded without negotiation, redirected without cost. This alone breaks a spiritual precedent that spans thousands of years. Because unseen protection is rare, but unseen protection without sacrifice is almost unheard of. In every era, those watched by higher forces were either consumed by the light or crushed by the dark. Very few were allowed to walk between both, untouched by either, still human, still breathing, still free. That is what makes your experience impossible by traditional spiritual logic. The system does not usually allow a soul to remain intact once it becomes visible beyond the human realm. When awareness turns towards someone, that person is typically changed violently or removed quietly, but you remained unchanged on the surface, while everything around you subtly rearranged itself to keep you in motion. It suggests something deeply unsettling for the structure of reality itself, that there exists a classification beyond the old categories, beyond martyr, beyond prophet, beyond king. A type of presence that is not meant to be consumed by destiny, but to move through it without being owned by it. And that classification is not described in temples or doctrines, because it was never meant to be common enough to record. Which means what you experienced is not just rare, it is disruptive. It is a signal that the old rules do not fully apply to you, that the patterns written for others cannot finish writing you, that whatever governs your path operates from a level above what spiritual history has ever comfortably acknowledged. And once something like that happens, the universe never goes back to pretending it didn't notice. And here is where it becomes personal. Because this rupture in probability did not happen in a vacuum. It was not random timing. It was not attached to chance. It followed something you did, quietly, privately, without witnesses or applause. A decision that did not benefit you in obvious ways. A choice where you could have taken the easier path, the self-serving path, the path that most people take without thinking, and yet you didn't. You chose integrity when no one would have blamed you for doing otherwise. You chose restraint when power was available. You chose truth when silence would have protected you. You chose compassion when bitterness would have felt justified. And the moment you did, something ancient responded. Because moral decisions made in isolation, without reward, without recognition, carry a weight that echoes beyond the visible world. They create a signature, a frequency, a mark that cannot be forged. That is the bridge between your choice and what followed. You didn't just do the right thing. You aligned yourself with a current that most people never even feel. And alignment is what activates protection, not belief. Not prayers spoken in fear, but action taken in clarity. The universe does not respond to what you claim to be. It responds to what you consistently choose to become. And when you chose what you chose, quietly, firmly, without spectacle, something took notice. Because in a world driven by impulse, ego, and survival, a soul that chooses integrity without guarantee becomes statistically dangerous to the old order. It becomes unpredictable. It can no longer be easily manipulated by reward or threat. And forces that thrive on control cannot tolerate what they cannot bend. So the protection did not come because you asked for it. It came because your decision placed you in a category where harm would no longer be permitted to reach you in the same way. You crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed, not upward in status, but inward in authority. And once a soul steps into that kind of alignment, the architecture of reality adjusts around it, not as a favor, but as a necessity. What most people never realize is that alignment does not go unnoticed. The moment your inner authority stabilized, the moment your choices stopped being reactive and became deliberate, something shifted in how you were perceived beyond the human layer of reality. You were no longer just another moving figure in the mass of lives flowing through time. You became observable, not in a way cameras or human eyes could capture, but in the way patterns, forces, and intelligences recognize anomalies in the structure of existence. And from that moment on, you are no longer moving untracked, not because you were in danger, but because you had become relevant. There are systems that exist beneath what people call coincidence. They monitor balance. They measure influence. They observe trajectories that could alter future outcomes. And when your path stabilized into something uncorrupted by impulse or fear, it triggered attention from both ends of the spectrum. Forces that preserve coherence and forces that profit from distortion. This is why certain obstacles suddenly intensified. Why some resistance appeared only after you found clarity. Why certain people entered your life at precise moments, not randomly, not accidentally, but positioned like pieces on a board that only you could walk across. Some were meant to test, some were meant to delay, some were meant to distract, some were meant to reveal. Because when something of consequence begins to move through the world, nothing that thrives on chaos ignores it. And yet, what is unsettling is not that you were observed. It is that despite observation, interference failed. Attempts dissolved before becoming damage. Opposition collapsed into confusion. What should have escalated into destruction dissolved into inconvenience. That is when it becomes clear that monitoring alone was not happening. There was also containment. Boundaries drawn around your path. Lines that could be approached but not crossed. And those lines were not visible. They were not announced. But every force that tried to test them retreated, as if something greater had already decided how far the world was allowed to reach you. Because observation alone was never the purpose. What truly mattered was whether you would remain who you were once pressure increased. And pressure did increase. In subtle ways. In quiet ways. In ways that most people would dismiss as ordinary life, but you felt the pattern. There were moments when dishonesty would have been easier, when no one would have known, when the cost of truth seemed heavier than the cost of silence. And yet you spoke anyway, or you walked away anyway, or you refused anyway, not loudly, not dramatically, but decisively. There were moments when bitterness would have been justified, when you were wronged, overlooked, or used, when anger would have been the natural response. And yet you chose clarity over cruelty, distance over revenge, self-control over emotional release. And each time you did, something within you strengthened instead of corroded. There were moments when giving up would have felt reasonable, when exhaustion whispered that your efforts meant nothing, when surrender seemed logical. And yet you remained, not because you were stubborn, but because something in you refused to become smaller than what you knew yourself to be. These were not random life events. They were calibrations, quiet measurements of your consistency, not of your perfection, but of your direction. The world was not asking whether you would never fail. It was asking whether you would return to alignment after every failure, whether your identity was rooted in impulse or in principle. And with every choice, something invisible was being recorded, not as judgment, but as recognition, because integrity chosen repeatedly under pressure becomes something rare, something structurally different from morality that exists only in comfort. And rare structures are not left unprotected. They are reinforced, preserved, integrated into the deeper architecture of reality. So while it felt like you were simply living, simply choosing, simply enduring, what you were actually doing was proving that whatever now walks with you was not misplaced. It was after this pattern stabilized that classification began, not by human standards, not by titles or roles or achievements visible to society, but by a far older metric, the one that measures a being by what they do when no reward is guaranteed and no witness is present. You are no longer viewed as merely resilient or merely principled. You are identified as something structurally rare, a presence capable of moving through distortion without absorbing it. And that is not a poetic distinction. It is a dangerous one. Dangerous not because it seeks to harm, but because it cannot be easily controlled. Beings like this do not fracture under pressure. They adapt without corrupting. They influence without forcing. They disrupt systems not by attacking them, but by existing differently within them. And systems built on manipulation, fear, and hierarchy cannot tolerate what does not respond predictably to either threat or reward. That is why this classification is double-edged. To those aligned with coherence, you are invaluable. To those that thrive on imbalance, you are a liability. Not because you oppose them directly, but because your very presence weakens their influence. You cannot be fully deceived. You cannot be fully owned. You cannot be cleanly turned. That is why the recognition carried weight. Because once a soul is seen this way, it is no longer just another life unfolding. It becomes an active variable in the evolution of collective outcomes, a factor that must be accounted for, preserved, or neutralized. And neutralization, in your case, was quietly denied, not because you were untouchable by strength, but because you had become untouchable by legitimacy. There was no justification within the deeper order of reality to remove you. No distortion you embodied that would allow interference without violating the balance that even darker forces must obey. And so you were recognized not as fragile, but as inconveniently powerful in the most subtle way possible. It was after this pattern stabilized that classification began, not by human standards, not by titles or roles or achievements visible to society, but by a far older metric, the one that measures a being by what they do when no reward is guaranteed and no witness is present. You are no longer viewed as merely resilient or merely principled. You are identified as something structurally rare, a presence capable of moving through distortion without absorbing it. And that is not a poetic distinction. It is a dangerous one. Dangerous not because it seeks to harm, but because it cannot be easily controlled. Beings like this do not fracture under pressure. They adapt without corrupting. They influence without forcing. They disrupt systems not by attacking them, but by existing differently within them. And systems built on manipulation, fear, and hierarchy cannot tolerate what does not respond predictably to either threat or reward. That is why this classification is double-edged. To those aligned with coherence, you are invaluable. To those that thrive on imbalance, you are a liability. Not because you oppose them directly, but because your very presence weakens their influence. You cannot be fully deceived. You cannot be fully owned. You cannot be cleanly turned. That is why the recognition carried weight. Because once a soul is seen this way, it is no longer just another life unfolding. It becomes an active variable in the evolution of collective outcomes, a factor that must be accounted for, preserved, or neutralized. And neutralization, in your case, was quietly denied, not because you were untouchable by strength, but because you had become untouchable by legitimacy. There was no justification within the deeper order of reality to remove you. No distortion you embodied that would allow interference without violating the balance that even darker forces must obey. And so you were recognized not as fragile, but as inconveniently powerful in the most subtle way possible. And it did not stop at classification, because recognition at that level never remains abstract. Once your presence was marked as structurally rare, it drew the attention of observers that do not engage lightly and never without purpose. These are not figures bound by myth alone, nor limited to symbolic language. They are intelligences of order, consciousness anchored in alignment rather than form. Not watching in curiosity, not watching in suspicion, but watching in verification. Every moment where your resolve held steady under pressure became part of a pattern they traced. Every choice you made in silence was weighed not by outcome, but by intent. And what they saw was not perfection, but coherence. Not flawlessness, but direction. A soul that did not drift randomly between impulses, but returned again and again to a core that refused distortion. This is the kind of consistency that draws divine attention. Not dramatic acts, not public declarations, but quiet, repeated alignment that remains stable across shifting circumstances. That stability is rare enough among human consciousness that when it appears, it is studied. And so your life became a kind of living testimony, not spoken, not written, but embodied. A demonstration that integrity could survive within density, that awareness could remain intact under pressure, that compassion could persist without becoming weakness. You were not being watched to see if you would fail. You were being watched to confirm that you would remain what you already were, regardless of context. Because beings that serve coherence do not intervene based on potential alone. They intervene based on proof. And the proof was in how little you changed when circumstances tried to change you. That is when witnessing becomes more than observation. It becomes acknowledgement, the silent recognition that something worthy of preservation is moving through the human realm. Something that does not demand protection, but justifies it through consistency alone. And once acknowledgement settles into certainty, something irreversible begins. Because witnessing alone does not complete the process. There comes a moment when observation transforms into authorization. A moment when the universe no longer merely allows you to move, but actively clears your path. This is where decree is formed, not as a thunderous command written in clouds, not as a spectacle meant for crowds, but as a shift in the underlying permissions of your existence. A quiet activation embedded deep within the structure of how reality interacts with you. From that moment forward, things no longer respond to you the way they do to others. Delays that once blocked you now redirect into preparation. Obstacles that once resisted you now refine you. What once slowed you now stabilizes you. This is not favoritism. It is alignment made operational. Because when a soul proves it can hold integrity without collapsing into ego or despair, the system no longer treats it as unstable. It is granted access to deeper currents. Not power over others, but coherence within itself. And coherence is what allows motion without fragmentation. This is the decree, that your path is no longer subject to random interference. That distortion cannot engage you without consequence. That harm may approach, but it cannot complete its cycle within you. That failure may appear, but it will never finalize as defeat. From this point, your identity is no longer passive within existence. You are no longer merely surviving the world. The world begins adjusting around you, not because you dominate it, but because you no longer contradict it. And when a being ceases to contradict the deeper order of reality, reality ceases to resist that being. That is when support becomes structural, not emotional, not symbolic, structural. And once something becomes structural, it does not withdraw lightly. And it is in that structural support, that undeniable realignment, that your true identity begins to emerge. Not as what you were told you are, not as the labels assigned by society, not as the fleeting self you thought you inhabited, but as something far older, far deeper, and far more essential. You are no longer merely human in the way the world understands. You are a celestial presence walking in the human plane, a warrior of unseen realms, a guardian of alignment that bridges what is visible and what is eternal. You carry a consciousness that has witnessed cycles of creation beyond what ordinary time measures. And though you feel its weight lightly in your daily life, it pulses within every decision, every glance, every act of integrity you make. You are a chosen one. Yes, but not in the sense that ego celebrates. You are chosen because your structure cannot be corrupted easily, because your presence shifts outcomes without force, because your existence affirms balance in a world constantly trying to tilt into distortion. You are an ancient soul, not trapped in memory alone, but operating through it, carrying knowledge that whispers to the world in subtle waves, influencing without announcing, guiding without control. And in every quiet act, every deliberate step, every moment of restraint under pressure, this identity manifests. The universe does not demand recognition. The universe merely responds. And when it does, what emerges is the unmistakable reality that you are not simply living a life, you are anchoring a frequency, embodying a form, representing an archetype that few ever reach. Others may see fragments, sense the difference, or feel unease in your presence, but they cannot replicate it, because you have crossed the threshold between survival and purpose, between trial and authority, between human expectation and celestial sovereignty. You are not merely protected. You are defined by the protection. You are the force that protection preserves. And with identity revealed, the universe assigns purpose. It is not random. It is not elective. It is a sacred mandate woven into the very alignment that has been sustaining you. You are no longer simply moving through life for survival or understanding alone. You are here to anchor integrity, to radiate compassion, and to stabilize what would otherwise fragment in the presence of darkness or confusion. Your presence is a template for what balance looks like in action. Where chaos encroaches, you are the quiet force that maintains order without domination. Where despair rises, you are the unspoken courage that allows hope to endure. Where cruelty tempts the weak or the powerful, your actions become the standard by which subtle correction occurs. You do not have to preach. You do not have to demand compliance. Your mere alignment acts as a gravitational pull, drawing others to act ethically, to consider compassion, to think with awareness. And this is why the invisible protection has always accompanied you, not as a reward, but as preparation. Because those who operate at this level do not stumble casually. They are tested, measured, and refined until their impact is proportional to their alignment. Your purpose is not optional, and it is not performative. It is structural. Every decision you make, every restraint you maintain, every act of deliberate courage becomes a node of influence rippling outward. You are a stabilizer, a quiet arbiter of energy, a living proof that a life rooted in integrity can move mountains without force. And as your mission unfolds, the protection you have always experienced shifts from shield to active collaboration, orchestrating opportunities, connections, and timing in a way that magnifies a purpose you are always destined to carry. You are not merely alive. You are a conduit of balance. You are a catalyst for alignment. You are operating exactly as you were designed to operate. And with purpose comes a shift in the material plane. Because alignment at this level does not remain abstract, it manifests. Life begins to move differently around you, not magically, but structurally, in ways that feel almost imperceptible until you notice the pattern. Doors that once closed remain open. Opportunities that once passed by now arrive at precisely the right moment. Support appears in the hands of those who were previously strangers, and guidance emerges through coincidences so exact that they seem orchestrated. Delays that once frustrated you now protect you from harm, redirecting events into hidden blessings you could not yet comprehend. Relationships that once faltered begin to stabilize, drawing people toward your frequency with ease rather than force. Resources, insights, and circumstances align, not as a reward for ambition, but as a natural consequence of the integrity you have maintained and the consistency with which you have walked your path. Even failures become temporary, recalibrating instead of defining you. What once threatened to derail your trajectory now refines it. And all of this is quiet, almost invisible to the casual observer. Yet those who oppose or envy you can feel it, the subtle way the world bends around you, acknowledging that interference will not succeed. It is a structural recalibration, a cosmic accounting that favors alignment over chaos, integrity over corruption, purpose over randomness. You do not need to chase fortune, recognition, or status. The universe itself begins to provide the framework in which your mission can flourish, offering the support, timing, and conditions that allow the chosen one to act effectively without unnecessary struggle. And as you notice the changes, it becomes undeniable that protection is not passive but active, and your life is increasingly synchronized with the currents that have always been moving just beneath the surface. And as your life aligns, something remarkable begins to ripple outward. You may not notice it at first, because these shifts are subtle, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. But every act of integrity you uphold, every choice to remain aligned with purpose, sends a vibration into the consciousness of those around you. People begin to wake in ways they cannot explain. They see clarity in moments that were once confusing. They feel courage in moments that were once paralyzing. They are drawn to act differently without being told why, compelled to rise to standards that exist beyond the ordinary, simply because your presence demonstrates what is possible. This is the natural ripple effect of the chosen one. A life that is aligned and coherent does not exist in isolation. It awakens others in its orbit, exposing latent potential, nudging dormant awareness, and inspiring subtle transformation. Those who have longed for guidance feel it without instruction. Those who have felt lost begin to find direction without counsel. And even the opposition, those who would disturb balance or sow confusion, recognize it instinctively, sensing that your influence cannot be neutralized without consequence. Every interaction, no matter how fleeting, carries the energy of alignment, and this energy spreads not by force, but by example. Your choices, your integrity, your quiet strength act as catalysts. Even when you are unaware, others are being called to remember, to awaken, to step into their own alignment. And this is the true power of the chosen one. Not simply protection, not merely purpose, but the ability to ignite consciousness around you, naturally, effortlessly, because your life is a living demonstration of what is possible when alignment, integrity, and unseen support converge in a single, coherent presence. And what you are experiencing is not unique to you alone. Across the world, there are thousands, perhaps millions, like you, moving in secret, living lives that appear ordinary on the surface, but carry the same frequency of alignment, integrity, and unseen guidance. They have been tested in ways that mirror your own trials, shaped by forces that measure consistency under pressure, rather than appearance or status. They operate quietly, often unaware of each other, yet their impact is cumulative, forming a hidden network that the world cannot perceive, but that the deeper order of reality has always recognized. And now, as your alignment strengthens, this network begins to activate in subtle, synchronistic ways. Connections emerge, not randomly, but as if the universe is drawing points together to form constellations visible only to those who are awake enough to see them. These individuals, like you, carry influence not through domination, not through visibility, but through coherence. When one rises in awareness, another follows, and another, until a ripple spreads across the globe that cannot be ignored. And yet, the system that governs this activation is delicate. Timing, integrity, and consistency remain essential. The network is alive, yes, but it responds to the quality of its participants. Every decision you make, every act of alignment, every moment you choose integrity over ease, strengthens the bond of this hidden web, making it more resilient, more effective, more capable of shifting the collective consciousness without drawing attention. You are not alone. You never have been. And the network, vast and unseen, is awakening, one aligned soul at a time, and your role within. It is pivotal, serving as both anchor and catalyst for the global emergence that has quietly waited for this exact moment in history. Now it is your moment to respond. Because all of this, the unseen protection, the alignment, the activation of purpose, the ripple effect, the global network, does not exist in abstraction. It interacts with you, and it responds to your awareness and engagement. The universe has noticed your presence, but recognition alone is not enough. It asks for acknowledgement. It asks for commitment. It asks you to step fully into the role you have already proven capable of inhabiting. And that is why this message comes with a simple call. Do not passively witness your own awakening. Participate. Engage. Anchor it into the world through action that resonates with the frequency of alignment. Write 777 in the comments to confirm that you recognize your position, your protection, and your mission. Subscribe to continue walking this path with guidance, reminders, and activation that reinforces your alignment. Share this message to allow others in your orbit to sense the possibility of coherence, to awaken to the hidden network that they, too, may belong to without realizing it. Stay until the end, not out of curiosity, but because every moment of sustained attention deepens the imprint of purpose, integrity, and unseen influence that flows through you. These acts, while seemingly small, are extensions of your mission. They activate participation in the network of aligned souls, reinforcing the protection and structural support that has carried you this far. Because the chosen one is never truly alone. Every acknowledgement, every act of conscious engagement, every commitment to presence strengthens the currents that sustain you. And the world, though unaware on the surface, bends subtly in response, creating opportunities, alignment, and influence that magnify your impact, your clarity, and your ripple effect across consciousness. The protection, the guidance, the unseen forces are real, but they work most powerfully when met by deliberate, awake action that bridges your awareness with the currents moving around you.